You're listening to Cars and Coffee, your local home for the latest in motorsports and automotive news here on 91.3 WHJE. And now, here's your host, Nathan Ward. Hello, and welcome to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. It's good to be back in the studio after a week where I didn't get to do a show, so it's great to be back, and we've got some stuff to talk about. But before we do that, make sure to head over to the official Cars and Coffee Instagram where you can get show updates, headlines. You could take a look at my absolutely awful race winner picks every week. You can follow our Instagram at carsandcoffee_WHJE. And if you haven't followed the station on Instagram, what are you doing? Go follow them at WHJE_radio. You can find full show replays on YouTube at youtube.com/TWIRvids, and you can listen live anywhere in the world at WHJE.com. With all that out of the way, there are a couple headlines that I want to get into before I get into the main body of this show. Two things came out today that I hadn't written into the prep. The IMSA schedule for 2026 came out. What I love about IMSA is that IMSA releases their schedules incredibly early. Like it's only March. Like they've already got their 2026 schedule set. Looking at you, IndyCar, you gotta get on top of things. But Road America has replaced Indianapolis Motor Speedway as the second 6-hour race, which, as an Central Indiana resident, I'm not a fan of. I love Road America. It's sad that the endurance race experiment at IMS only lasted 2 years. IMSA's still coming to IMS, but it's only going to be a 2-hour and 40-minute sprint race with all the classes there. But it's kind of sad, as an Indy resident, to not see an endurance race. I would have loved to see the race extended to 6 hours and 42 minutes because that was the length of the very first Indy 500. Look how far we've came now. Look how far we've come from, 110 years ago, it'll be 109 years ago, that Ray Haroon completed 500 miles in 6 hours, nearly 7 hours. And we're doing races in 3 now. We've cut that in half in a century and a bit. That's we've been doing pretty well. But the other headline is actually IndyCar related. In the Grand Prix of Arlington date has finally been set at March 15th, 2026. This is one that I find a little bit interesting, due to the fact that a couple years ago when the St. Petersburg Grand Prix contract got extended, the date for the 2026 race was going to be March 15th, 2026. Now, that was back when IndyCar was still on NBC. There could have been a very different, with Fox calling the shots, they could have had St. Pete move their 2026 date up 2 weeks to the very beginning of March where we had it this year. That's completely plausible, and that's honestly probably what has happened. We won't really know until mid to late summer when the IndyCar schedule comes out. The IndyCar schedule came out really early by its standards last year because the Fox TV deal got finalized in June. It was right after Detroit, I think, which they needed something positive after what was absolutely a terrible race. And also congratulate the horrendously underrated Indy Lights driver Toby Sowery for becoming Ray Hall Letterman Lanigan Racing's new reserve driver. So Yuri Vips is no longer associated with IndyCar at all. Kyle Conley's smiling right now. But moving on to the first main segment of the show, when Fox took over the sport, this was something that a lot of people were looking at when it came to how is Fox going to perform against NBC, which had been broadcasting the series on its own since 2019. How many viewers on TV is each race going to have? And really, the only metric of TV ratings of TV viewers you have is the Nielsen ratings. And I have found, courtesy of Nathan Brown on Twitter, the last seven events, 7 season opening events, and their viewers. 2025, Fox at St. Pete, 0 streaming options. You can't find it anywhere except for basic TV. 1.417 million viewers. That is huge, and it beat out. It just beat out another race that you will see or you will hear about later in this list. The last year's race, the 2024 race, only got 975,000 viewers, and that's including Peacock. That's not good. Anything sub 1 million viewers is not good. 2023, 1.2 million, slightly more respectable, but again, that includes Peacock adding maybe 75 to 100,000 viewers. Again, if you look at that, this is one of the reasons why a lot of people say they don't need a streaming option for IndyCar. Like, compared to the average million or so people that watch IndyCar every single week, not a lot of them watched it on streaming. Not a lot of them watched it on Peacock. Like, Toronto a couple years ago, I mean, Toronto was the Peacock exclusive race until Fox came on, but the Toronto race had like 75,000 viewers for a couple years. Like, nobody watched Toronto, mainly because nobody has Peacock, and there are very few people that actually like have Peacock as their main source of consuming live TV. It's just not something. It's used as basically NBC's version of Netflix, so you can watch. I don't even know what's on Peacock anymore. The Office is on Peacock. The Office is a wonderful show. But back to the point. 2022 was the biggest number on this list, but there is a big fat asterisk next to it. 1.429 million viewers. That's NBC at St. Petersburg. All these have been at St. Petersburg, and all the NBC ones have included Peacock. This, including Peacock, makes it the largest rating. If you take away the Peacock viewership number, you get around 1.405 million people, I think is what the rating was. That's lower. So Fox knocked it out of the park first race. Technically, by people watching on basic TV, they had higher numbers than what NBC had ever pulled in the single broadcaster era. Going back to 2021, that was a weird season because the Grand Prix of Long Beach was the season finale because California COVID moment, and St. Pete had the race moved back because of their own COVID issues. That race was actually held at Barber. The season opener was held at Barber that year. That averaged 921,000 viewers. The 2020 opener at Texas, that was kind of a fever dream. That race also sucked. That averaged 1.285 million viewers. And the absolutely horrible number for the 2019 season opener, which was the very first IndyCar race I ever watched as a full-time fan. I was one of only 495,000 people that watched that race, mainly because it was on NBCSN. Now, the 2019, 2020, and 2021 metrics, really, they are lower because they don't include Peacock, because Peacock, I don't think, existed. Peacock didn't exist until late 2020, but I don't think IndyCar was on Peacock, like, readily available until 2022. Looking at that, Fox did an incredible job getting a rating that has not been achieved by an IndyCar event outside of the Indy 500 since the 2011 season opener at St. Petersburg. The problem is, past St. Petersburg, it is 3 weeks until the next race at a track that does not produce good racing. Marshall Pruitt brought this up in the Racer mailbag, I think, about some random guy that asks about changing the schedule every single week, because there's always one or two of those in the mailbags. Like, why doesn't IndyCar change the schedule and have tracks that produce good racing, first on the schedule so you can hook fans more? And like, that's just not how scheduling events at locations work. You can't delay St. Pete to July because July in Pinellas County, Florida is skin melting. But you go 3 weeks without a race. St. Pete already doesn't produce good racing. It doesn't produce great racing. The environment is cool. The atmosphere is awesome. It's a cool place to have a race at an airport right on the bay. It is not a great producer of racing. The main issue that people have with the beginning of the IndyCar season is that it goes to 3 tracks that don't produce good racing, and they're all incredibly spaced out from each other. So you really don't get a quote-unquote good race until you go to Barber in late April or early May, depending on where the days fall. That's not good for viewer retention. So you wait 3 weeks after St. Pete, you go to Thermal. Thermal did not produce good racing last year. Granted, I will give Thermal a little bit of slack. They did not have a full field event last year. That is something that a lot of people criticized. You had 10 to 12 cars on the track at any time. Maybe the race will produce something interesting if there are more cars on the track. That is definitely possible. But then when you leave Thermal, no matter what happens at Thermal, you have to wait another 3 weeks until you get to Long Beach. And Long Beach, as a narrow street track, doesn't produce great racing. It's historical. It's the heart of IndyCar. It's the second heart of IndyCar besides Indianapolis. But it doesn't produce good racing. And having 3 tracks back to back to back with large amounts of time between them doesn't facilitate good viewer retention. People will tune in to St. Pete because it's the hyped up beginning of the IndyCar season. But if someone turns on the TV and it's IndyCar racing at the Thermal Club and no one has made a pass in, 12 laps, they're going to turn it off. They're going to say, man, this is boring. Why can't they race somewhere else? That's why I'm saying close the early season schedule gaps. And I'm thinking with Arlington, they seem to be closing an early season schedule gap. They're moving the gap between St. Pete and whatever races after it, whether it be Thermal or Arlington, down to 2 weeks, which I think is a more reasonable gap. And Arlington, it is yet to be seen on whether it will produce good racing. I hope it will. All reports so far indicate that Thermal Club is getting dropped from the schedule, I think. I wouldn't be surprised because they basically just threw it on there because SMI kicked us out of Texas. But the rumored Mexico City race would be on April 12th if it were to happen at all. It would be on April 12th, 2026. So that closes the gap between Arlington and Long Beach a little bit. It only goes, that goes from Arlington to Mexico City would be 4 weeks. I would suggest moving Mexico City up a week, so it's 3 weeks to allow the teams to get all their stuff to Mexico, make sure all their stuff gets into Mexico, and then 3 weeks for the same thing, have the crew members rest a little bit, and then you go to Long Beach. I think that's a more useful exploitation of a 3-week gap in the schedule to go somewhere else outside of the country, even if it is right next door, and probably get a better return on what you're doing there. You also need to open the season at tracks that produce good racing. I love St. Petersburg as a location. That area is cool, and I love that IndyCar goes there. The problem is, the track doesn't produce good racing, as I said earlier. Neither does Thermal, and neither does Long Beach. I think you need to have an oval in the opening stretch of the season. The fact that the 500 is the first oval of the season is kind of sad. I don't care. Go out and rent Phoenix. Phoenix will probably produce good racing. It's basically Milwaukee with slightly more banking and a dog leg. The short oval package has been pretty good at everywhere except for Iowa the last couple years, mainly because NASCAR botched the repave at Iowa, so Iowa just kind of sucks now. But I think Phoenix would be a good option. I think if NASCAR didn't kick us out of all their tracks, I think Homestead would be a good option to have a Florida swing, except no one would show up to Homestead, which is honestly kind of sad. We can't get people to show up for ovals. That's why there are so few of them on the schedule. No one wants to sit in bleachers anymore. They want to walk around, see the cars up close. The speed doesn't sell anymore, which is kind of sad. But overall, IndyCar could do a lot to keep new viewers. In general, there are more things you can do to, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just waffling on here, but there are more things that IndyCar can do to be able to keep new viewers. I understand promoting on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. That's great. Getting to a younger audience that is completely addicted to short form TikTok style content. That's great because I can post anything on, I don't know, Instagram or, God forbid, YouTube Shorts. I do not like YouTube Shorts. But you can post anything on YouTube Shorts and it'll get like 10,000 views within like 24 hours, which is great for promoting literally anything. But there's a lot for IndyCar to do, and I think it's going to be a long hill, but the series still has promise. I have hope for Arlington. I don't like that we went there instead of going back to Texas, but if we're getting paid by Jerry Jones, as much as I hate Jerry Jones, I really don't care. Up next, after this song break, options improve strategy for NASCAR's race at Phoenix. Should it be time to take them to all short tracks? You're listening to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. Here's Tom Sawyer from Rush. Don't go anywhere. Cars and Coffee will be right back on 91.3 WHJE. Hi. If you're listening to this, that means you're listening to the show on playback. I just want to say thank you for listening and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss full-length show replays when they're uploaded. If you're listening on playback on the radio, go to youtube.com/TWIRvids. If you're listening to the video on YouTube, just click the button below. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. We now return to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. Hello and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. My name is Nathan Ward. We are back here talking about some NASCAR. Now, Goodyear they've now experimented with a softer option tire at 3 NASCAR Cup Series tracks. They did it at the All-Star race in North Wilkesboro, they did it at Richmond last year, and they just tried it at Phoenix this past week. All of them short tracks under a mile, or a mile or under, because Phoenix is a mile. The question now becomes, should NASCAR implement the option tire at all short tracks to improve the quality of the racing and strategy? Phoenix provided a great variety in strategy from team to team, and many drivers exploited the increased speed of the option tire to power through the field and hope for a lucky caution. This race was received as one of the best Phoenix races in years, with Christopher Bell beating Denny Hamlin by inches for his 3rd win in a row. Could NASCAR improve racing on other short tracks by introducing option tires? Probably. Like, if you look at Phoenix, you had Ryan Preece, who started 28th, I think. By the end of the first stage, he was 3rd. The thing about the option tires, especially at Phoenix, they were faster, but they didn't degrade as fast as NASCAR thought they would. Now, if they do not change the tire formula at all for the option tires, which is highly unlikely, I would love to see option tires be introduced for the championship race at Phoenix in November. I think that would create a much more entertaining race at a track that in the next gen era has been decried as incredibly boring. There are some driver opinions on this that seem to, prove that the option tires seem to be working. Daniel Suarez jokingly called racing with options during the Richmond weekend as he called it playing Mario Kart when you get a star, which, that's kind of a funny comparison. I love Mario Kart. I need to play more Mario Kart. But honestly, the options, the next gen short track product has been incredibly lackluster throughout the car's entire existence. I skipped Martinsville last year. I skipped both Martinsville races. I watched every single race except for the cup races, the 2 cup races at Martinsville in the spring and the fall. They just weren't good. Martinsville is not a good track for racing for these cars. Do I understand why it's on the schedule? Absolutely. It's the oldest track on the schedule. But it doesn't produce good racing. Now, if you took the option tires to Martinsville, the racing might not be great. It still might be incredibly hard to pass just because of how wide these cars are. But at least you'll have people on different strategies, and you'll create added suspense by saying, "Oh, I don't know which strategy's gonna cycle to the lead by 5 laps to go. When are the cautions gonna fall?" That sort of thing. Strategy still, in my eyes, creates entertainment. It doesn't create as much entertainment as it does, seeing a dogfight for the lead at a track like, I don't know, Las Vegas. We're going to Las Vegas this weekend. But it could be better. Like, Iowa was already good, thanks to the crappy repave that NASCAR did that made the IndyCar race horrible. But the Iowa race was good. Richmond was except for the finish. But that was a race that was already on option tires, and I'm kind of glad that it lost a race date, because Richmond really did not deserve to have 2 race dates. But if you look at the other short tracks, I think the short tracks on the schedule are North Wilkesboro, Richmond, Phoenix, Martinsville, Iowa. There's 2 more I'm thinking of, Bristol, and there's 1 more that I can't think of. You wouldn't call Dover a short track. I think Dover would be more of an intermediate. But think about those 6. Those 6 tracks haven't produced the best racing over the last couple years with the next-gen car. With the option tires, you can at least add a little bit of the strategy factor to get people on edge about, oh, my favorite driver's in this group of cars. Will they come out the leading 5, or will they come out 20th to 25th? You don't know until the final cycle of stops. I think that added suspense keeps people watching, and honestly puts more people in the stands. Because if they know they're going to see an actual race instead of a parade, maybe they'll actually buy tickets. Now, Martinsville has never particularly been a bad seller in terms of attendance. I liked Martinsville as a track before the next-gen car. I like it with everything but the next-gen car. Watching MX-5s race around Martinsville was such a fever dream. It was such a silly race. It's just... You can only do that at a track like Martinsville. You can't take MX-5s to the Daytona Oval. That's how someone gets hurt. But if you look at... Honestly, NASCAR has had such a problem with the short track product that you need to change something. And it's not going to be stage cautions. It's not going to be some random gimmick. Just try what they've actually learned from open wheelers here in a sense other than taking the flat underbody from an Indy car and putting it on a Cup car. That's been a large issue. But I think options provide a boost to the quality of a race, because at Phoenix, the option tires lasted about 60 laps. The first stage being exactly 60 laps, Ryan Preece played it perfectly. He had an early caution to conserve his tires just a little bit to make it to the end of the stage. He could go all out, and he climbed from 28th to 3rd in 60 laps. And he was able to stay up at the front the entire day, even though you had a lot of other people. Well, you had to run option tires. So there were other people on option tires around him, but he was able to stay competitive even when he wasn't on those tires, because he had gotten himself up there in the early stage of the race, and I think that was a great strategy. I won't be surprised if there's someone in the championship race, if they bring option tires to the championship race, especially someone in the championship 4 who starts further back, try that strategy. It worked incredibly effectively, but the final stint, there were some that didn't take option tires at all, so they can have the final 120 lap stage to use both sets of option tires back to back. And I think that might have been a wise decision. I'm not sure of Bell and Hamlin's tire choices throughout the entire race, but that was definitely the most entertaining Phoenix finish in years. It was definitely the most entertaining Phoenix finish with a next gen. There's never been anything like that. The most suspenseful of a finish I can think of recently since the reconfiguration of the track in 2019 was David Starr's car blowing up in 2021 and Kyle Larson's team getting a good pit stop, which won him the championship, which Kyle Larson deserved that championship that year because he went on a tear. But that's really all I have to say about the option tires. It just seems like an instant win situation for NASCAR to implement them at all short tracks where the racing has been certainly lackluster. When we come back, we're going to talk about this week's races and make some picks. You're listening to Cars and Coffee on 91.3 WHJE. Here's Paper Cut by Linkin Park. Don't go anywhere. Cars and Coffee will be right back on 91.3 WHJE. Hi. If you're listening to this, that means you're listening to the show on playback. I just want to say thank you for listening and make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss full-length show replays when they're uploaded. If you're listening on playback on the radio, go to youtube.com/TWIRvids. If you're listening to the video on YouTube, just click the button below. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. Don't go anywhere. Cars and Coffee will be right back here on 91.3 WHJE. Hello and welcome back to Cars and Coffee here on 91.3 WHJE. That was Paper Cut by Linkin Park. My name is Nathan Ward. It's time to make some picks. But before we do that, let's talk about the races that are going on this week. F1's back. The off-season is finally over for all you diehard F1 fans, except if you're living here in the central Indiana area at least, or at least the east coast of the U.S., you're going to have to get up real early or stay up real late to watch this one. F1's coming to the Albert Park circuit for the first Australian Grand Prix to open the season since 2019. It'll be Sunday morning, early Sunday morning at midnight. You can find the race on ESPN if you're audacious enough to stay up that late. IMSA's back at Sebring International Raceway after 6 weeks off since the Rolex 24 for the 12 hours of Sebring. That is Saturday at 10 a.m. You can watch the entire race on Peacock and select parts of the race on NBC and USA. All three NASCAR National Touring Series are at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. The trucks are there for the EcoSave 200. That'll be Friday night at 9 p.m. on FS1. The Xfinity race, the Liuna, there is no number. It's 250 miles, but the race is just called the Liuna. It's going to be on Saturday at 4:30 p.m. You can find it on the CW if you have the CW. If you don't have the CW, you can go get an antenna for like $20, at least if you're in the central Indiana area, so you can get Channel 8 to watch the Xfinity race. The Cup Series is going to be competing in the Pennzoil 400 Sunday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That will be on FS1. Now, it's time to make a few picks. For F1, honestly, I really don't think that a team like Ferrari or Mercedes is going to be able to challenge McLaren. McLaren are the reigning Constructors' Champions. I don't think Red Bull has the car this year. I don't think Red Bull has the powerhouse that they've had the last couple seasons, and even then, they didn't really win much in the back half of the last season because the car design reached its peak and Newey left. So, really, Newey left, so the car reached its technical ceiling. I'm going to pick Lando Norris here. It seems like a pretty easy pick. I think any McLaren driver, either of the two McLaren drivers, is a really safe pick. Oscar Piastri's going to be racing hard. It's his home race. It's a season opener. He really wants to win in front of his home nation, his home crowd. But I think Lando's the number one driver, and I think they're going to give him the better car. With IMSA, I actually have a lot of picks to make here. So I've got four classes to talk about. Overall, I think the Cadillac Wayne Taylor team is going to stay at the top of the board for Sebring. I don't have high hopes for any of the smaller contenders, any of the smaller team contenders, that being the Lamborghini and the Heart of Racing Aston Martin. Already, as free practice has been going on today, the Aston Martin has not been that fast in Sebring practice. I don't have enough confidence in them to give them any sort of high finish unless you end up with a race of attrition. So my overall / GTP pick is going to be the number 10 Cadillac, being driven by Ricky Taylor, Felipe Albuquerque, and Will Stevens. My LMP2 pick, every time I have to pick for an LMP2 race, I just spin a wheel. And this time the wheel landed on the number 2 United Auto Sports car, Nick Bull, Juan Manuel Correa, and Ben Hanley. GTD Pro. This is hard. This is where you kind of get into the weeds here. It's hard to judge 3 driver lineups, especially in a race as long as the 12 hours of Sebring. In a race like, say, a NASCAR Cup race, you can kind of make an assertion on which team is going to have the better car, which team has the better driver. But with so much variety within sports cars, I think it's harder to make picks. That being said, I think the number 14 Lexus team looks really strong. You have Jose Maria Lopez coming in, former hypercar driver, replacing, or I think he's still a hypercar driver with Toyota, but he is replacing Ben Barnicoat, who was unfortunately injured in a bicycle accident. Not props to David Malukas, but shout out David Malukas, because David Malukas is awesome. But he is going to be driving alongside former Indy Lights driver Aaron Telitz, and also former Indy Lights driver and now current IndyCar driver for Andretti Global, Kyle Kirkwood. So I think that 14 team has got it this year. I don't know why, or this race. I don't know why. It's just a gut feeling, and my gut feelings are strangely correct. GTD, again, balance of performance, so you kind of just have to spin a wheel, and the wheel landed on the 96 Turner Motorsport car. I thought Bill Auberland was in this car. Apparently not. The car is being driven by Patrick Gallagher, Robbie Foley, and a guy I've never heard of named Jake Walker. I'm sorry, Jake Walker, in advance, if you ever come across this, which I doubt you will. My NASCAR picks, to round out the show, I think William Byron's got it in Cup. I think he's the open favorite. He's the Hendrick driver. He's the top Hendrick car. He's already won the Daytona 500 the last 2 years. I think he's got this one. For Xfinity, I'm also picking a previous Vegas winner, the number 21 RCR Chevy of Austin Hill. Austin Hill has taken the field to school whenever he's leading the race. Like, whenever he's leading, it seems that the rest of the field just turns into idiots because they don't know how to stop him. He's just that good. He really should be in Cup by now, but Richard Childress is not letting his grandson out of the car. So hopefully Austin Hill gets a Cup ride and stops bullying these kids one day sooner or later. But with trucks, again, trucks is weird. Trucks is kind of like an LMP2 scenario. You kind of have to spin a wheel, but I like Tricon Garage. I think Tricon Garage has a really good driver lineup with the Toyota development drivers, and I think out of those Toyota development drivers, I think Giovanni Ruggiero is going to win at Las Vegas Motor Speedway in the number 17 JBL Toyota. That will be it for this week's show here on Cars and Coffee. You're listening to 91.3 WHJ. My name is Nathan Ward. Thank you for listening. Here's Jet Airliner by the Steve Miller Band.